You're listening to the Turn Autism Around podcast, episode number 227. A few weeks ago, I aired a podcast interview with two behavior analysts interviewing me all about how to better support teachers in schools, as well as all school staff, and hope you enjoyed that interview. Today, we're doing something similar. I was interviewed by my good friend, Ann Sheybani, who is a Harvard-trained writer. She is a book doctor, a ghostwriter. She also owns a publishing house. You can find out about her work at annsheybani.com. And she is interviewing me here, and I'm going to play that interview, another turn the tables interview, if you will. But she interviews me on why the first book, why the second book, Turn Autism Around, and actually helped me create the synopsis for my second book. We talk about that. We talk about autism being a controversial subject and how I deal with, those controversies. It's a great episode if you want to hear more different stories potentially from me. And it's also a great episode to listen to and watch if you are thinking that you might want to write a book someday. It's a great interview. Hope you love it. Here's Ann Sheybani interviewing me about writing autism books.
So I'm super excited to have my friend Mary Barbera here. Mary is the author of Turn Autism Around. So Mary, you and I have known each other a really long time, and we had the opportunity to work together on the synopsis of your book. And I want to talk about, some of the interesting things about your synopsis in general. But probably the first question my audience has is, why would anybody need to write a synopsis? You've written a nonfiction book, and we'll talk about what your book is about because it's really important. But why did you have to write a book synopsis?
So thanks for having me today. Yeah, as you said, we've been friends for a long time, since about 2016. So I'm in the autism world. I've been in the autism world since 1999, first as a confused, overwhelmed parent, then as a behavior analyst. And then I decided to write a book. In 2006, I wrote it. In 2007, it was published by a niche publisher, a traditional publisher, but a niche publisher. This book's called The Verbal Behavior Approach: How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders. So that was my book. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Most books sell, 1,000 copies in their whole lifetime. My book has sold probably 100,000 copies. It's in 17 languages. I traveled around the world. It put me on the map. I went on to earn a PhD. And now I sell online courses to help parents and professionals help kids with autism and toddlers showing signs. But when I decided to write another book, which is Turn Autism Around, which came out through Hay House in 2021, I didn't really know about a book synopsis. I actually came to you as a friend, and knowing that you are a very good writer and ghost doctor, book editor, and all the roles, and a publisher. And I basically was like, okay, I've decided I'm going to write a second book. Kind of let me pick your brain and see, where should I start? I mean, I had a book proposal for my first book. I had a journalist that helped me write my first book. I didn't get an agent for my first book. And like I said, I had a traditional, I didn't get an advance with my first book. And so I said, if I'm going to write a second book, I want it to be huge. I want it to be as big as possible. I want to get a really big publisher, if at all possible. I want to get an advance. I want to get PR. I want to do it. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And the first thing you said was, that's great. And the first thing you need is a book synopsis to help you. It's basically a page or two to really get your ideas fleshed out. What the book's about, why you, why now, how is it different than your first book? What is the demand for it? Just really the nuts and bolts that you could take and give it to an acquisitions editor, whether it's a big publisher, a small publisher, or whether you could give it to an agent if you wanted to get an agent. I was very set on the fact that I wanted an agent. I wanted this book to be as big as possible. So we started with the synopsis.
Yeah, I want to talk about that synopsis too, because I look at a lot of synopses, synopses, I think is the plural of it. I should probably know that, right, as an editor. And people struggle with a synopsis. And one of the things they struggle with is they really need to put themselves forward. They really have to show the agents and the publishing houses who you are and why you are the person to be writing this book. And you come to the table with all the credentials that experts wish they had, right? You've got the PhD in behavior sciences, you've got the nursing degree, you've got the alphabet soup behind your name, and you've got the previous publication, and you had a pretty big platform of people who are following you and whatnot. So you're the golden child. You're the person that agents want to work with because you've already developed that platform and that audience. But the real secret, the real hook that you kind of touched on in the beginning, but almost went away from, is your personal connection to autism, how you had a toddler very early on in the whole, kind of autism development, of your autism development expertise, who had it, and you had done what a lot of parents do and put your head in the sand. And what's really compelling about your story is there's a very strong feeling that if you had known differently, if you'd been an expert at that time, you probably could have saved your son, or you could have slowed down developmental delays, or I
could have changed the trajectory.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, he wouldn't have autism, but I do believe that the autism spectrum is very wide. And many of my clients have gone on to go to college, drive, that's how long I've been in this. And I always say that if I had the knowledge in here that I have in the Turn Autism Around book, that I believe Lucas's life and my life would be really different. And it's not just Lucas, it's all the clients, all the course participants who have told me their stories and told me how they were, I changed their life. Their child went from 2 words to 500 words in 30 days with just my course. Even to me, that's kind of remarkable and hard to believe almost. And they've become part of my success stories, part of the success stories that are in the book. A couple of them work for me now as coaches because they've watched everything. They believe in it. They can see the power that this works in whatever, we don't have a crystal ball. Like, we can't go back and see what Lucas would be like if I had this information. Nobody had the information. That's the problem. And we can't go forward. So, my whole thing is I was in denial for more than a year after my husband, who's a physician, first mentioned the possibility of autism. I told him it wasn't autism. I never want to hear the word again. I went into a deep state of denial. In the opening of my first book, The Verbal Behavior Approach, I say I was a registered nurse with more than whatever experience. I mean, I've been a registered nurse since the 80s. When my husband first mentioned the possibility of autism, I told him I never, ever wanted to hear the word again. and I went into a deep state of denial. And so now, back then, the autism rate was 1 in 500. Now it's more than 1 in 50. So the numbers have gotten much worse. The waiting lists for evaluations and treatment have gotten much worse. A few things have improved, but it really is a struggle, and the autism spectrum is very wide. So
yeah, that right there, those numbers really speak in a synopsis.
Yeah, and they were in the synopsis because
as to why this book matters right now. And when you and I were talking about it, we're an editor is always listening for the hook. An agent and a publishing house are always looking for the hook. And you had a really bold hook. And the bold hook was essentially that if you catch autism pretty early on, you can dramatically improve the chances.
The outcome, whatever the outcome is. I mean, we don't know what the outcome is. And the subtitle of Turn Autism Around is super important too, an action guide for parents of young children with early signs of autism. So I want to get to parents well before it's autism. And that's where I'll just add to what you said. If you catch autism early enough, if you catch speech delays, developmental delays, social differences early on, you can oftentimes change the trajectory. Catch kids up in as many areas as you can, prevent problem behaviors, teach them things like teach yourself how to deal with picky eating, sleeping, potty training, dressing, which kids with autism tend to have more issues in those areas, tend to have much more speech delays and things like that, tend to have more problem behaviors. So the key is that it doesn't matter if it's autism or if it's a speech delay or if it's early signs of ADHD or even early signs of giftedness. These are all positive parenting strategies to get a child from wherever here is to moving forward, and so the key differences between my first book and my second book is my first book is the verbal behavior approach, how to teach children with autism and related disorders. But I know I had to, once I got up on the mountain, I had to go back down to get the parents in denial, waiting on wait lists, because time is of the essence. And the best time to treat it is now. It's kind of like planting a tree. When's the best time to plant it? 20 years ago or
the audience was the same, but they were at different stages of the problem. Let's call it a problem.
And I wanted to get them while they were just worried about their babies. I mean, even now, just this week, I think I got 5 messages on social media from parents of 6-month-olds, parents of a 9-month-old. Should I be worried? Could this be autism? It doesn't matter if it's autism or not. Half of the participants in my toddler online course don't have a diagnosis of autism. I mean, this really is just great parenting, great advocacy, become your child's best teacher and advocate for life. But I needed to stay in the autism field because that's really what I'm known for. And so it wasn't time to pivot to that general parenting market. It might be for my next book, but that's where coming back to the synopsis and working with you, at least at that stage of the journey, really was helpful.
Yeah. So let me talk about that statement you made about moving towards a broader market. So you were dealing with parents of autism. You recognized that if you caught parents of younger kids sooner, then that they would get potentially a different outcome. If you could go back and wind the clock back and grab them then, you would be able to interrupt some of the behavioral issues
and teach them positive ways. Like you get all kinds of different advice. Your kid's a picky eater. Well, don't feed them anything besides the good food, or don't, let them roam around with 2 bowls of Cheerios after they refuse to eat, the meal. Like, you get all these different advices. And, as a behavior analyst and as a registered nurse, my philosophy is all based on science, and it's all based on mostly preventative, all child-friendly ways. And so it really doesn't matter if it's autism or just toddler delays or you're worried. Maybe you have an older child with autism, which then the younger sibling has a 1 in 5 chance of also having autism. So these are just parent-friendly, strategies that work with kids with the language ability of a 1 to 5-year-old. So my 26-year-old is actually still has the language ability of a 1 to 5-year-old. Teens who are non-vocal or having, still not potty trained are functioning in that level. So but I didn't want to write a book just generally for autism, because I felt like my first book dealt with that. I wanted to really target parents and early intervention professionals of very young children with early signs of autism, with a diagnosis or without, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I want to speak to the fact that you are an expert in a very polarized field. You are an expert in this is an extremely polarized field. And it's a polarized field is going to be attractive to publishing houses, and it's also going to make them nervous. It's going to, there's a lot of languaging that has to be chosen. There has to be a lot of careful consideration to what the criticisms of your methodology, what those criticisms are going to be. You're definitely going to get criticism out there, putting yourself out as the expert and recommending this methodology, this scientifically backed methodology. It's not something that you made up along the way. You were trained in it. You have a PhD in this. So how has having this book out in the world, how has working through this book with this publisher in this particular environment altered how you show up as the expert? How have you evolved because of this book?
Yeah, I just first want to address like the polarization in the field of autism, because writers may not know why it's polarized, or if it, that statement may not be known. But since the autism spectrum is so wide, there are some autistic individuals that are adults who are potentially driving, fully conversational, and they are talking on the internet and commenting on posts, and they don't they think that autism is a gift. They think that only the individuals or individuals with autism could fully understand, what a young child needs, what my child needs. It's kind of it's probably a small minority, but they're very vocal. And so when media and publishers or TV shows want to feature autism, they tend to only do it in April for Autism Awareness Month. And even though, 1 in 44 have autism and 1 in every 6 children are developmentally delayed or have a disorder. So, it's kind of, it is kind of scary. My agent was concerned about that. She had emailed me before she took me on, like, what would you say if somebody said, they don't like ABA, applied behavior analysis, which is the most evidence-based treatment for children with autism. Even saying treatment for autism, it's like people are like, saying things like trying to get kids, better or talking. Like, it's just like, okay, well, what would your suggestions be for a 2-year-old who's not talking, having tantrums, extremely picky, rolling around the parking lot. Like, I'm telling you, I use a child-friendly, systematic, proven approach. And so I don't, even before my newest book, and now since then, I don't engage in backlash or debates. If somebody says ABA is cruel, different conversations like, how dare you, you're abusive. There's nothing about me that's abusive.
Yeah.
And I'll stand behind that, but I won't debate with them. I will simply block them.
I think I watch you. I watch you out on social media. I watch you presenting. I watch you staying on point. I watch you bringing evidence and stories to support your statements. I don't see you get hooked in, and I'm sure, any writer who gets, backlash from people who disagree with their take, be it, a professional scientific take or, a take on how you approach a given situation or your personal story, your personal opinions. You stay really, really steady. And, the advice of not to engage with that is excellent advice. And I really love having you speak to that, because you really are in that really hot, it's a cauldron of people who have very strong feelings about that, particularly right now. And I admire how you make your statement, the statements that are in your book. You stay on point. You've written about this. You've spoken about it on podcasts. You've got case studies that support your approach, and you constantly are using that information in this greater debate. And a lot of my writers are really afraid of putting their thoughts and opinions out there, putting their framework on how they deal with a particular, problem solution pathway. And they're very nervous that other people aren't going to agree with them. And you you entered into the subject for a very personal reason, and you grew your expertise in response to what happened in your private life. And you've used it to help a lot of other people. So it's
well, and I live with it every day. I have a son, Lucas, who is 26. He's here. And then Spencer's 25. They're 18 months apart. Spencer's in medical school 1,000 miles away, and Lucas needs 24/7 care. So when somebody says autism is a gift, we should embrace it. We shouldn't worry about a 2-year-old's rolling around on a parking lot. That's sensory issues, and we need to accept it and embrace it. And no, we need to get on it. And so my message is, in my mind, too important to be stopped. And so, I will debate a little bit if I have to, but if somebody's going to come on my social media platforms or email me or whatever and are nasty, no, thank you. You're done. And, because if you don't, and I have a team that I pay money to go through my comments every single day, probably twice a day, 3 times a day. If I see something, I'll quickly block it. But it's otherwise you will get shut down and you will get canceled for really, people don't like the title of my book. What do you mean, Turn Autism Around? You're trying to cure it. You're trying to fix it. Well, no, I'm trying to fix the delays as much as possible. It certainly would be better for Lucas, for my family, for taxpayers, if Lucas was able to drive or be by himself while I ran to the store for 15 minutes. Or even as a taxpayer, if you know no one with autism, which is very unlikely, you should be concerned about the rate of autism and these delays, and the fact that you can improve where they are on the spectrum in many cases. You can change the trajectory in many cases, and the earlier you start, the better you will do.
So let me pause and just switch trajectory for a moment, and I want to talk business for a sec. So how does Turn Autism Around fit into your business? Meaning, if people read Turn Autism Around, what else, where else, or what else would they come to you for? What is that book going to lead a reader to if they want more?
So if they read the book, 6 or 7 places, it says for the book resources, for the free book resources, go to turnautismaround.com, and there people can read the first chapter, listen to the second chapter, and get all the assessments, a blank assessment, a filled out assessment, for free, and they'll get into my email sequence. And the really the best place for people to land, whether they're landing initially or they're landing through the book, is to my online course for toddlers and preschoolers. That is really the best thing I have. It's not that expensive. And even if somebody wanted me, like if it was my best friend or my grandchild or whatever, you need to watch the course, because in the course, I have videos, demonstrations, all step by step what you should do. I'm creating a Train the Trainer program that's launching in March. So that is, I sell on Evergreen. I sell every day. So there's a very big path forward, and that is through my online course. I do have a course for older kids as well. That is more like a secondary market. Like I know that people with 8-year-olds and 15-year-olds need my work too, but it's a lot harder to turn things around for an 8 or 12 or 15-year-old if you're not talking, not potty trained, and have severe problem behaviors. You can take all the information in this book, Turn Autism Around. You can take my courses, and you can, especially if you have professional help, because that's the other factor, is by the time they're 8 or 12 or 15, now you've got school staffs who are potentially reinforcing problem behaviors. You've got different opinions. Whereas if you're at home with your 2-year-old or 18-month-old or 3-year-old, you can really do a lot yourself with just the book and the course. And people in my course that don't read the book, I'm like, get the book. Which is better, the book or the course? Actually, both are good. The book is a handbook, and the course will show you videos, step-by-step instructions, and provide a community of support where when you get in trouble, when they are flopping on the ground or, biting their brother, you're going to be able to come to us, and we're going to be able to direct you to the right resources to hopefully get that problem behavior near zero. And
so I look at the book as something that somebody else can hand a friend, as somebody else that it's so much easier to share. And yet the course allows people to go deeper, to get the tutorials, to get the visuals, so they can track
and get community support and unstuck calls with my team, because, it's all, if you just have the book, hopefully it'll go well. But, you may have, autism plus apraxia or plus Down syndrome, or you may be a single mom and have to send your child to a daycare that's not really doing the right things. Like, there are lots of factors, right? And so without having that community and those coaches to help you get unstuck, you could still stay stuck.
So here's what I want to do. I want to wrap up, and I want to point out 3 takeaways for writers.
Okay.
Number 1, what a synopsis is and why you need it. So we've covered that. One of the things that you covered as well is how to enter into a polarizing field and deal with criticism and deal with a lot of other stuff. The other thing that I didn't mention is you are, and also, how to use your book to bring people deeper into your world, how it can help the greater population, but there are a certain percentage of people who are going to benefit from going deeper, and they can do that by taking your course. So you've got the very clear picture that can show up in a synopsis, and you're super clear on that. You've got the ability to deal with criticism and to deal with a polarizing subject. And you've got the business acumen, you've got the strategy, all of those things in place. The other thing that people don't recognize, because we haven't really spoken about it, is that when you get an idea, you act on it. You heard that idea that it's time to write another book, and within, I would say, 2 weeks, you were on it. And very few people do that. So those are 4 things for writers to take away from you. Now, a lot of the people in the audience are going to be wondering themselves if their child might have delays that are associated with autism, or if there's somebody close to them whose child is potentially autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to point to you because you are probably one of the most compassionate, scientific, no nonsense, helpful, generous human beings I know. And I can't think of a better resource for any of these parents or any of these people who are concerned that there might be developmental delays associated with autism, or just developmental delays in general. I want to point to you. Mary, if you could spell your name and you can give us your website. I'm going to include this in the show notes. Mm-hmm. But yeah. I would love it if you could give that.
Yeah. So if you're out running now, or you don't have something to spell out my name, you can easily find me anywhere at Mary Autism plus whatever specific title or topic you're struggling with. But it's all of my stuff is at marybarbera.com, Barbera. And then the book resources and everything get redirected to marybarbera.com/new-book, I believe, but also turnautismaround.com will be easy to remember, hopefully. And as a writer, you may want to read the first chapter, listen to the second chapter. Those are, my journey, other kids' journeys, why the big deal. I think the first chapter is called If Autism is an Emergency, Why Are We All Waiting? Because the wait lists for evaluation and treatment are so bad. And then the second chapter is all about the signs of possible autism, possible early ADHD, or just a speech delay, quote unquote. So that would give you a good sense of what the book's about. And then you could recommend it to somebody who you're concerned about. And if they say, oh, it's definitely not autism, my doctor doesn't think it's autism, the speech therapist said it's not autism, it doesn't matter. This helps with kids with early signs of anything. And it works great with typically developing kids as well. So that will get people to me. Now, if you want to know about my synopsis, the book doctor I use, the agent I use, no, I don't discuss all that because I'm too busy in the autism field. But Ann, my good friend, knows who I used, and she can direct you with all the writer stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate your time and spending your giving us your wisdom and giving your whole approach. And yeah, so thank you.
Yeah. And I would say if you feel like you have a book in you and you want to really proceed, just make a goal, set your goal and start setting the steps of your goal. Okay, I want to write a book. Okay, let's work on a synopsis first. Let's work on what the back cover would actually say. Let's work on a chapter outline. There are a lot of things you can do today to get you closer to that goal. And Ann is really one of the best writers and book editors, and she's just a wealth of information. So I hope that this is helpful. And again, if you have anybody with autism or delays, turnautismaround.com or marybarbera.com. So thanks again.
Thank you, ma'am.